But someone sent a DM. I assume they don't want their name shown. It starts with an M. But it says, I have a question for the next QA. I'm looking for a privacy respecting mobile payment solution for Android phones, basically Google Pay without Google. I appreciate your input. Best. And I read it out to Jonah right before we started, and I mean, it's sad, but like my response is like, good luck. Mainly because I don't know of anything that exists outside of using some kind of third party service like privacy.com. And that's for transactions within your phone. That's not to actually conduct transactions like at stores as you would with Google Pay or Apple Pay. And Google really restricts, this is a Google thing. Google heavily restricts if you're on a rooted device, if you're on a custom ROM, if you're on anything that's not stock Android. Um, with Google Play services, they're not going to let you use Google Pay. I don't know if you have any experience with any alternatives, but I actually don't even know where to start with this.
Well, that's not entirely true on Google's side of things, actually.
Okay.
Android does have an API where apps can choose to implement their own NFC payments, which is very different from like the iOS side of thing. I didn't know too much about it because here in the US, I don't know of any banks or other apps that use this API. And so I kind of thought it was the same as what you were saying, where it was just kind of locked down on Android basically, and only big OEMs like Samsung could maybe make an alternative because, of course, there's Samsung Pay. But it is available as an option to banks. It's just very uncommon. I haven't found a single example. I was asking around and can't find any in the US. I do know, though, that in the EU, some banks do support NFC payments within their app rather than using another service. And so all of that would go directly through the bank's infrastructure rather than relying on Google. So that's pretty much your only option. It really comes down to what your payment method supports. And in the US, like I said, I have been looking around a lot. I can't find a single instance of any third-party app supporting it. Everyone just seems to be on the Google Pay train. And it's just a couple of banks in the EU seem to do their own thing, from what I've seen.
Makes sense.
So that's pretty much your only option. But yeah, not a lot of good options, unfortunately.
Yeah. I guess the only alternative, always you have the option to use your cards as they are. And if you're really extra for whatever reason, you really need a Google Pay, you're looking to maybe just carry around a second phone that supports it. That's the only option. Oh, you know what? I wonder if you have like a custom ROM with like a Google, is it a Pixel Watch? I wonder if you can get Google Pay running on the watch. As long as you have a phone at home to like get it set up and linked, maybe you're able to pay remotely with the watch if it has cellular, but then you still need a watch. It's not an ideal situation.
You might be able to. The problem with Google Pay from like a privacy perspective, I made a whole video about this
Yeah.
on my channel, but there's basically it runs everything through Google servers, all the transactions. So there's some limited offline use where you can like get some they call them tokens that you can save to your phone and then make payments offline, like with that set amount of tokens before you have to refresh what you have from Google servers, but eventually you have to make a reconnection to Google servers. So when you're using any Google Pay product like that, or maybe it's Google Wallet now. I heard they just renamed again.
Of course.
That was in the news.
Why
I
would
don't
they
know
have
what it's called,
consistent
but you
branding?
guys know what I mean. When you're using Google's services, it pretty much does require a connection to Google servers to get like the authentication and connect with the bank. Everything goes through them, which is in contrast to like Apple Wallet, for example, which works more like cloning your card onto your phone. So Apple Wallet works completely offline, and transaction data isn't um, shared with Apple in that case. So
Right.
that's kind of the difference between them. But on the Android side of things with Google Pay, you do have that connection, no matter how you use Google Pay, which you should probably think about if you're worried about Google seeing your transactions.
I need to look into it more. I told you I don't really watch many YouTubers outside of my Judge Judy Lunch Crew episodes. Um, but I have actually found a blogger I unironically really enjoy following, and it's Birch Tree, I think is what it's called. And he recently put out a a little thing about how finances work between Stripe and Apple and why the whole thing in the EU is such a big deal and how Apple like really overcharges developers. And just it wasn't a privacy article, but he actually talked about how Apple advertises the privacy benefits of Apple Pay because it generates like a unique card. But there's a whole thing, I forgot what it's called, but he talked about how there's actually a unique identifier that companies can still use through Apple Pay to still track essentially who you are. And I want to look more into it, is all I'm going to say. So if I find anything interesting, it could be a fun video that I might make about it, because he really got into the nitty gritty of how Apple Pay works. So I want to see what that's about. Could be interesting.
And you're talking about like um, merchants that you use Apple Pay with tracking you, like
Yes.
tracking you between stores and that kind of thing.
Yes, like there's a different unique identifier that's tied to those transactions that could very easily be correlated, that Apple doesn't really talk about. So it still
Yeah,
protects your card info, but it doesn't protect the privacy of the consumer when it comes to like their habits, so to speak. Um,
that definitely is the case. I'll have to watch that video. That sounds really interesting.
it was his blog.
My understanding, oh, it's a blog. Okay. My understanding is that Apple Pay, when you add a card, it generates a new card number, but that
Hmm.
card number remains static on like a per device basis. So that would be my guess as to what he's
It's a
talking
different thing.
about, and that's definitely a case.
It's a
Could be a
different
different
thing.
thing.
Yeah,
That'll be interesting though.
yeah, because I was under that same impression. So it's something I'll look more into.
But there
Well,
is still that tracking vector as well. We'll have to look more into
yeah,
it.
yeah, we'll chat on Signal. Hey, thanks for watching this clip. Here's another clip for you, and if you want to really dive into tech, check out our main channel, Techlore, for a deeper dive into digital rights, privacy, security, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.